Ho ho ho, the Christmas season has come to a close. Truly a joyous time of year. Now whether you're a child who got presents under the tree and a large sum of cash from grandma, or an adult with a sizable Christmas bonus from your boss Todd, the Christmas season usually brings a little extra cash to spend. You have recently gotten a VR headset, or maybe not so recently, and are looking to buy a multiplayer VR shooter game. But there are 4 of these such shooter games, and they're all direct competitors to each other. So which one do you get? Well, don't worry my friends, because today I'm going to be rating and talking about the unique features of each VR shooter in detail, so you can know which one is right for you to buy this season. The main realistic VR shooters out right now are Pavlov, Onward, Vail, and Contractors. Now of course there are more VR shooters than those 4, but the others are all very niche and different. For instance, Population 1, essentially Fortnite VR. If that sounds interesting to you, I made a full video review on it a little while back, so click the top right corner to check it out now. Well, you're still here my friends, so I guess Fortnite VR didn't exactly tickle that itch. Now then, let's check out these games. First on the list is Onward. One of the first VR shooters released, Onward was a pioneer in the VR shooter space, yet it still gets updates to this day. Onward is both on the Oculus Quest Store and on Steam. Now, I will admit, of all these games on this list, I've played Onward the least, and that's because I personally don't like it too much. But that isn't to say it's bad. You see, Onward specializes in hyper-realism. This means no indicators above teammates' heads, no opening menus mid-game, and if you're new, often no way to tell what on earth is going on. Shooting mechanics is perhaps the most important variable in whether or not a VR shooter is going to be any good, and Onward doesn't do a terrible job. I do find that the guns are a little unresponsive at times. TTK, or time to kill, is almost realistic in Onward, as a single round for most rifles is enough to put you 6 feet under. If you want to use pistols though, be prepared to use a couple of shots. Honestly, the graphics are all in all very unimpressive. Almost all the maps are significantly uglier than industry standard, and same goes for the workshop ones. Almost all of them look just simply awful, like things you would expect to find in early Roblox. The player base is an important part of any multiplayer game, and while Onwards isn't huge, it's big enough to find a game without issue. According to Steam charts, Onward has been averaging around 42 concurrent players on Steam this last month. That being said, the rule of thumb for cross-platform VR games is that you have to multiply the Steam number by 6 to get the actual number. This means Onward should have about 250 concurrent players. This really isn't a lot by multiplayer standards, but it is enough that you shouldn't have any issue when looking for a lobby. Onward has all the game modes you would expect to see: co-op against AI, team deathmatch, gun game, etc. But it also has a really cool Escort the VIP game mode, where you have to bring one of your teammates to a designated location without them dying. I had by far the most fun when playing this mode. This is where I believe Onward thrives. Onward has plenty of great features I wish I could see in more games. On your back, there's a tablet that serves as a mini-map. Pull it out and it will help you find your way. Almost no VR games have mini-maps implemented this way. Most VR games don't have mini-maps at all, and the ones that do are usually on your HUD, taking up valuable field of view. It's refreshing to see mini-maps implemented in such a flawless way. There is also tactical equipment that I've seen exclusively in Onward. There are bipods you can rest on objects to steady your gun, flip-up scopes that magnify your red dot, and night vision goggles, all of which are a blast to use. Onward also has a really cool spectator system. When you die, you can either spectate other players' POVs on a flat screen, or you can commit VR Inception with the goggles on the table. Putting them on will essentially allow you to free spectate around the map. I think the way they implemented this is just so clever, and the in-game headsets actually reflect what you would see even before you put it on. A very cool touch. Now honestly, I didn't play Onward too long, so I saw very few bugs. The only thing that stuck out to me was how dumb the walking looks. Now, walking in VR generally looks a little derpy, but Onward definitely wins the worst walking award. All in all, Onward's not terrible, but I also didn't love it. I highly recommend it to people who love ultra-realistic games like Tarkov, but for everyone else, I give it a 6.75 out of 10. By far the most popular, as well as the face of the VR shooter industry, Pavlov originally showed up as a VR version of CSGO, and over time, became a mix of many games. Now I have the vast majority of my hours in Pavlov, spending more than 2,000 in game. That said, this doesn't mean I don't have any issues with it. About a year ago, I actually made a negative review video for Pavlov, and it quickly became my most watched video. Now in hindsight, I do regret calling that video a review, as it was more just an angry open letter to the developers about their misconduct and the game's really annoying hit registration issues. Even after this negative review, I really didn't stop playing until half a year later in July. I want to move past that drama, so I won't be talking about it in this video. If you want to understand what I'm talking about, I still have that video up, so you can either head over to my channel or click the right hand corner right now. Mamma mia, the shooting mechanics in Pavlov are just splendid. I will openly say that no other VR game even remotely competes with Pavlov in this regard. Each gun has a hard to master and complex recoil pattern. When a gun is fired, the recoil, sounds, and haptics work together so it feels like you actually just shot a gun. Movement is simple, yet refined, and time to kill varies depending on skill level. If you want to use an easy gun with reduced recoil, then DPS will be a lot less than say the AK, which has hardy recoil but is a one-hit headshot. All the guns look good, and the reloading is well done. Generally, you have unlimited ammo, which is a smart decision in itself, but when ammo is limited, you can mag pool. For some reason, Pavlov is the only one of these games with mag pooling. There is nothing more frustrating than spending half of your magazine on an enemy, and then having to choose between discarding a third of your ammo or facing the next enemy with only half a mag. That choice isn't fun. After the kill, I just want to chuck my mag away and grab a new one, just like in most non-VR games. Most of the default Pavlov maps look pretty nice, and they usually are pretty well designed from an organization standpoint as well. That being said, they aren't all great. For instance, Data Center is perhaps one of the blandest maps in gaming history, and Bridge is just a single bridge. Now where Pavlov truly thrives, or at least where it used to, was the workshop. Modders working day and night to bring you everything from COD Z to Dust 2. I personally recommend trying out the SCP Secret Lab and Kill Show maps, both of which are absolutely amazing. For more details on what Kill Show is, and what makes it so great, head over to my channel or click the right hand corner now. Pavlov had one of the largest player bases. Standard Pavlov was getting around 1.5 to 3,000 concurrent players, and Shack had even more. The issue is the Pavlov developers haven't actually updated the standard game in over a year. And if this leaked message from the head Pavlov developer is anything to go off of, it is likely that it will never be updated again. Already we have seen the effects of this, with Pavlov currently averaging well under 500 concurrent players. As time goes on, this number will continue to grow smaller and smaller, until it eventually reaches 0. Wait, it is I, Remix Gamer, from the future. The one from after I actually wrote the script. I found out just recently that Pavlov's beta branch just got a massive update, adding features like proning, motorcycles, and a new gun. But will it be too little too late, or will this be able to revive the player base? Let me know what you think in the comments down below. In addition to the custom game modes that are always popping up, Pavlov has a decent set of standard ones. Search and Destroy, aka CSGO, Push, a large-scale take-the-objective kind of ordeal, deathmatch, TDM, gun game, one in the chamber, TTT, which is kind of like Among Us, but with guns, a pretty standard zombie survival co-op mode, and The Hide, which is an asymmetrical horror mode where one player is invisible and has a bunch of abilities, and a task force has to neutralize it. I have a full video explaining it on my channel, and you can see it now by clicking the top right-hand corner. Perhaps the most impressive is the integration of vehicles. Trucks, quads, little buggies, that kind of thing. And let me tell you, vehicle warfare is very much fun in VR. These vehicles, however, pale in comparison to the tanks, which are operated semi-accurately. You need a 3-man crew to fully operate a tank. One to drive with the 2 sticks, one to aim, load and fire the main gun, and a machine gunner, all who have to cooperate perfectly for the tank to operate as best it can. Pavlov also has by far the best throwing mechanics. Hard to master, but very responsive. If you practice, you can make a grenade or throwing knife go exactly where you want it to go. While technically not a bug, Pavlov is notorious for bad hit registration. This is an issue that comes with most VR games, but is especially prevalent in Pavlov. Essentially, bad hit reg is when you shoot a target, but the bullet isn't actually registered of having hit, so your enemy takes no damage. This can definitely be annoying, but honestly, if you aren't a high-level competitive player, you're likely not to have even noticed it. Pavlov is an impressive VR shooter, with an excellent casual, competitive, and social scene. I give it an overall 8 out of 10, so yes, I do recommend it despite how I've reviewed it prior. We're halfway there, so before we continue, I'd like to take this brief moment to humbly ask you to subscribe. I notice every like and subscription and read every comment. I appreciate the people who are already subscribed, and you guys are why I do this. I have a full-time job, which means when I make a video, I'm using the rare free time I get. So by subscribing, and honestly just by watching my video, you're making this time well spent. Anyways, I should be getting back to the video, but please, do consider subscribing. Vail is the newest challenger to the VR shooter market. Having only recently entered early access on Steam, it has gained itself an unprecedented amount of hype and capital, mainly due to its involvements with NFTs and a promise of being an esports-focused game. Now, whether or not their goal was successfully implemented is up for debate. I have a very mixed opinion on the shooting mechanics in Vail. The guns do generally feel good, but what's interesting is none of the guns actually have much recoil. Essentially what this does is lower the skill ceiling and raise the skill floor. Now, this isn't by any means a bad thing on its own, but for some reason Vail is targeting high-level players. The niche that I would say Vail fills more is a shooter where it's very easy to hit shots, so a beginner's game. Games like Pavlov are much better suited for esports, and unless Vail dramatically changes, then this will remain the case. Vail has only rifles, SMGs, and pistols so far. I was hoping they would add some different guns soon, but I have my doubts, seeing as it took Vail 6 months to add 4 guns and a basketball hoop. I gotta say, this is perhaps where Vail falls the hardest. If I'm being honest with myself, disregarding the terrible graphics of the maps, because again, it is still a very new game, the map layout of both Volt and Kidi are both pretty terrible, and then the creative choices are just really questionable at best. In a supposed sci-fi shooter, all the guns are just real-life modern guns, and for player avatars you choose between Goofy Aw Burglar and Space Judo Master. I'm honestly not sure what they were going for here, but I hope it changes with time. Currently, Vail is averaging about 60 players, which isn't great, but seeing as it is still very new, it isn't unexpected or a huge red flag. As the game is developed, this number could fluctuate greatly, so take it with a grain of salt. Currently, Vail only has TDM and Search and Destroy. Both are very standard game modes, and honestly, I find myself getting bored of them very quick. Vail doesn't have a whole lot of unique features, outside of the many menu minigames, but it does have one that I think is really cool. the way you set the bomb in Search and Destroy is by doing a little holographic 3D puzzle. You have to touch all the little orbs with the big orb. Now, originally there were also orbs that you couldn't touch or it would restart the whole process. Unfortunately, they have removed these for whatever reason, so that is a bit of a bummer. Now, the bomb defusal, on the other hand, is quite boring, and you just turn the whole thing upside down and wait a set amount of time. Why they didn't have a separate puzzle to defuse it is beyond me. Now, the final unique feature Vail has is a really just pleasant developer team. Now, the personalities of the developers do play a minimal role in how good the game actually is, but it does mean if you have to talk to them for whatever reason on the Discord or something, that you'll probably have a pleasant time and be treated respectfully. Vail is exciting and could turn out to be a huge success and a fun game. But as it stands, it's not really a very good competitive game. Development is slow, and it certainly is no Pavlov killer like I previously thought it was. That said, it's not a bad game either, and I can confidently rate it 7 out of 10. It's a pretty good pickup if you have the extra cash. Finally, last but not least, Contractors VR. I first played Contractors a bit over a year ago, and honestly, wasn't very impressed. However, with time, my opinion has greatly changed. Contractors has pretty unimpressive shooting mechanics. The gun's recoil feels clunky. The guns themselves collide with other players and objects, which is very annoying. Still, the collision is better than Vail's, but it is still very annoying. Nothing really feels like it has oomph, and for some bizarre reason, until a week ago, you had to hold trigger to pump the shotgun. Luckily, this is no longer the case. Contractors doesn't seem to register headshots very well, and some of the guns are substantially smaller than they should be. Contractors does have the best melee weapons, and is also the only VR shooter to have bows, which are actually quite a whole lot of fun. The default maps are fine, but frankly again, they are underwhelming. The graphics quality isn't great, and the layout is pretty meh. The modded maps and such are a whole different story though. So unlike Pavlov, Contractors seems to be more quality over quantity, and this is where the game shines. There's a Star Wars mode where you play as clones and battle droids and use laser guns. There's a Team Fortress 2 mode that feels just like the original, down to every detail, minus Spy and Engineer, which have yet to be implemented. Halo, with almost all the guns, both UNSC and Covenant, as well as plasma grenades and energy swords. These three feel like standalone games, and are nothing like base Contractors. If these mods were sold individually as standalone games, I wouldn't be upset. They were created expertly. Other than that, there are also some work in progress things, such as a musket mode and a Titanfall mode with double jumping and a bunch of the original guns. While Contractors have a mediocre standalone game, these VR iterations of existing shooters are what makes this game so great. Steam Charts says Contractors has been averaging 77 players on Steam. So multiply this by 6 and we can estimate that Contractors' player base is around 450. This isn't amazing, but it is high enough that you shouldn't have to worry about finding a lobby. A nice thing about Contractors is since the community modes aren't through Steam Workshop, you can play these modes cross-platform with your friend. Base Contractors has point domination, gun game, TDM, deathmatch, search and destroy, and a zombie survival mode. That being said, with mods there are others, such as push the payload. Contractors has a lot of unique features. Contractors is the only one of these games to support jumping and sliding. Contractors also has a large emphasis on melee weapons, and is the only one of these games to have bows. Most of its unique features do come from the modding community though, as stuff like Star Wars, TF2, and Halo all have things that make them special. While I really don't like the Contractors base game, it more than makes up for it with the mods. Again, playing Halo, TF2, and Star Wars in VR is some of the most fun I've had, so I have to give this game an 8.5 out of 10. Absolutely recommend. Well, we've looked at all your options now, so you should have a decent idea of what games are right for you. Now before we end this video, a quick recap. Onward is hyper-realistic, Pavlov is polished and has vehicles, Vail is the best for players who aren't very good at VR, and Contractors has TF2, Halo, and Star Wars Battlefront. All of these games are fun, and none of them are by any means bad. Some are just better than others, and some just fill specific niches. Now, before you go, please do consider subscribing and leaving a like on the video. As I said before, it means a whole lot, and it really does make more videos like this possible. If you end up buying any of these games based on my recommendation, or if you already have these games, let me know if you agree with the scores I gave. Now, I'm also considering doing a series where I examine all VR games based on the category and compare them. For example, what games have the best Star Wars or Halo experiences. If you'd like to see those, subscribe, and let me know down below if you'd actually like to see that. I hope to see you in a future video.